Thank you, everybody, for being here today. It's a real pleasure to organize this webinar with all of you. I am Frederic. I'm the co-founder and CEO of D-Carbonize. And today we are very lucky because we have our very own CEO and my business partner, Grégoire Talbot, who is here today to introduce this webinar. Hi, Grégoire.
Thank you, Fred. It's a real pleasure to welcome you to this webinar. So we wait for more than 40 people today. So I'm the CEO and the co-founder with Frederic of D-Carbonize. Last December, we had the chance to participate to the COP28. We were in the Belgium delegation together with Frederic. And today we have the pleasure to share with you our expertise and our experience of the COP28 and try to share our vision about the world decarbonization. Maybe first I will present in a few words D-Carbonize. So D-Carbonize, our mission is to measure and reduce the carbon footprint of the companies. For that we have two technology. We have the Carbon Cockpit Advance to certify the carbon cockpit of the companies. And we have a new product. It is the Scan. It is a light version of the advanced product and to help company to measure the carbon footprint with only 30 questions. So in the next slide, so we have today more than 60 customer in 12 different countries. So we have two kinds of customer. We have big customer like Aisin, Aperham, Belfus, big customer, and we have plenty of SMB company between 10 and more than 500 people. Today we are certified by B Corp. We are certified by Solar Impulse. We love this certification because with Solar Impulse we have the vision to help company to reduce the carbon footprint, but also to define a carbon strategy which is profitable for the companies. We are also the first company outside France to be certified, to be totally compliant with the ADEME and the bilan carbon methodology, and we are also compliant with the greenhouse gas protocol. We are a passionate team of 20 people, so we have a big growth for the last 2 years, and now I'm very proud to introduce Frederic. So Frederic is my brilliant associate. After his MBA in Imperial College, he has worked for several years in London for a big as a strategic consultant in the sustainability. And so we started this project 3 years ago together, and I'm very proud to present you Frederic. He will spend time with you for the next 30 minutes.
All right, thank you very much, Grégoire. Welcome again to everyone here in this webinar and to the ones who will watch the recording. So I will be speaking for roughly 30 minutes, and in the end of this presentation, you will have time to ask questions. So if questions pop up in your mind, feel free to write in the chat or in the Q&A section, and Mathilde will collect them. Thank you in advance to those who shared their questions, as usual, in advance via email. Usually, when I give a conference or when I give a speech to customers, I'm there to talk about carbon accounting. And people are just getting like this, completely scared, completely afraid. And usually they would leave the room. So today it's not the case. So please don't hang up. Stay on this webinar. We will not be talking about carbon accounting. Today, what I would like to do is to take you on my trips that I had the chance to do for the past few months to meet people from all around the world to talk about decarbonization. Obviously, the pinnacle of these trips was the COP28, where I had the chance to attend as an official speaker and as a delegate of the Belgium delegation. If you want to watch the recording of the speech, it's also available online. And obviously, as you can imagine, quite a lot of people challenged me about the fact that we took the plane to get to Dubai. But let me tell you one thing. I don't feel quite ashamed because let's make this clear. I truly believe that getting people altogether has been the most efficient way in the human history to get to agreements and to get to people moving forward. So all of my business trips, and I hope yours as well, are carefully thought with only one objective: get people to act. And that's exactly what we did at COP28. That was our purpose. But before we dive into it, do you know what is a COP? Think about it. How would you define a COP? First, let me introduce you this with the map. So this plan was my best friend for the few days I spent there, because the site was so huge that you really need this to survive over there. And you have two zones. The first one is the blue zone. You see the blue zone here at the bottom of the plan. It's where all the official negotiations and discussions are happening. Ministers, governments, organizations, NGOs, and so on are advocating, defending their point of view in order to get to the final agreement and other agreements on the side of the main one. The green zone here is a sort of environment festival. It's where you will find a lot of companies showcasing their innovations, their products, showing their ambitions related to decarbonization. And that was very interesting. So let me take you on the ground for a moment. What you will find at the COP28, you'll find fancy buildings, fancy machines, fancy innovations. You will find national buildings, because this site is the former Expo 2020 site. So you will have the national houses. This one is, for example, the one of Saudi Arabia. That was very impressive. You will find weird buildings. You will find as well the Belgian building. So during COP28, if you wanted to have a good beer or some French fries, that was the place to go. And last but not least, the Globe. That is the, let's say, the iconic building of this site that symbolizes the world and getting people all together. So that's for the setup. What about the content? So I'll make it short. In our perspective, there are three takeaways to consider. The first one is the agreement is not that special in its sense, but it's very historic in the way that for the first time, a member of the OPEC is saying that we need to phase out, well, it's not written, as you all know, but we need to phase out from fossil fuel. And this is a very strong symbol that we need to remember. The second point is the reinforcement of the finance industry, because they play a very important role in the fight of climate change in two ways: financing the energy transition. We'll talk a lot about that in a moment, and also bring trust back, I should say, on the market about carbon credits. The last point that was quite striking for me is that I think during COP28, countries from the Middle East stepped out of the wood and showed their ambitions and motivations to take a leadership position in the decarbonization sector. They really want to be in the driving seat, and I will tell you more in a moment. So based on our discussions with all the people we met over there, when we came back, Grégoire and I, we defined 6 decarbonization trends at a global level. The first one is the one that we are experiencing every day with D-Carbonize, is the fact that companies are now measuring their CO2 emissions or considering to measure their CO2 emissions. They consider to change their behavior, change their business models, and they want to implement solutions to reduce their CO2 emissions. That's a fact. This is what's happening now in Europe. And if you haven't done yet your carbon footprint assessment and your carbon strategy, now is the right time to do so. The second point is the finance sector. So financing the energy transition is very capital intensive. It requires a lot of money. And what we could meet over there was a lot of banks, investment funds looking for companies, projects, people to invest in order to accelerate the energy transition. So it's a very important point. And the second point is about carbon credits, because whether we like them or not, carbon credits are still needed on a short-term perspective if we want to claim to be carbon neutral or to get to a low carbon economy. So bringing back the trust on this market that buying one carbon credits is trustworthy is essential for the decarbonization industry. And this is why I can already tell you this: the next COP, COP29 at Baku in Azerbaijan, will be mostly about the finance industry and those 2 points. Third point is regulation. Well, we are all experiencing them. Obviously, in Europe, there are some laws, CSRD, carbon tax, the CBAM. In the US, the SEC released a new regulation. So it's happening, it's ongoing, it's evolving. The fourth point is not always mentioned, but we should not forget about nature. For now, natural carbon sinks are the most powerful ways to capture CO2, to withdraw CO2 emissions, GHG emissions. I put here this card from Climate Fresk, which is a wonderful tool for you to understand all the causes and consequences related to climate change. And this card shows here that 25% of greenhouse gas emissions are absorbed by oceans, 25% by nature, trees, vegetations, and so on, and the rest goes into the atmosphere. So really important to protect our oceans, to protect our nature in order to save our atmosphere, to absorb too much of GHG emissions. Fifth point, technology and innovation. We believe at D-Carbonize that it's very important to include in the equation new technologies. And they were at COP28 two main aspects: carbon capture. Yes, for now, the market is still in its infancy. It's very hard to capture carbon, but there are some very interesting projects that we will monitor that could bring real solutions to capture CO2 emissions directly out of the chimney of an industry, for example, a cemetery, or directly in the air, like a giant pump. The other element is the new energy, solar farms or SAF in the aviation industry, a sustainable aviation fuel. Those new fuels that will power our industries of tomorrow, our vehicles of tomorrow, will be essential in order to move towards a carbon neutral world. The last point is the one that we are now experiencing with some of our customers and that we experienced with some people we met over there. Companies are investing to reduce their carbon footprint, but they're also now investing to brace for impact, to be prepared for the damages from climate change. And let me share with you 3 stories that we experienced over there. The first one is related to DP World. Well, we met some very senior people over there, and they said that they had to close last year ports for more than 6 days because waves were too high. And those ports were not designed to absorb those waves. And those waves are directly related to a natural phenomenon from climate change. Can you imagine what is the cost of closing a port for just 1 day? It has a lot of impact. The other point is the steel manufacturing. Over the summer, we had some heat waves, and they could not cool down their machines because water would be released too hot. If this happens again, they would need to consider to invest into machines or installations that would cool down the water before being released in the river. And that would cost a lot of money and take a lot of time to be implemented. The last point is the one that we are experiencing with some of our customers that are in the insurance industry. What is an asset that can be insured tomorrow? Well, close to us, think about the north of France. They are experiencing floods for the past 2-3 months. If you're an insurance company, would you like to insure a house, a car, a machine that is flooded 1 or 2 times a year? It would cost too much money. So at some point, you really need to rethink what is an asset that can be insured in the future. So we've got many, many stories to tell, but unfortunately, I had to select 3 of them for this webinar today. So that's for COP28 insights, right? But a COP is literally where the world meets. And I'd like to share with you what I have learned about the global decarbonization trends I got from engaging with people from all around the world. And at D-Carbonize, we're fairly lucky to have a global presence already. We are present in the US. I think Sam, our business developer in North America, is in the audience, where we regularly give conferences. We are obviously present in our domestic market in Europe, where we give conferences. This one is the one from Vivatech last year. And now you know that we participated at COP28 as speakers. And when we were flying back from COP28, we were thinking, how can we draw decarbonization profiles from these different discussions that we had a bit everywhere? And here are the results. So we tried to draw three profiles: the American, the European, and the Emirati, or let's say the people living in Middle East. And we considered different elements. The first element is the individual level. You, me, the people that we can discuss with. What are their environmental motivations? Well, in the US, maybe not surprisingly for some, the motivation is quite low regarding environmental efforts. And let me tell you one thing, I don't blame them. I don't blame them at all. And I will tell you a story. When I was giving a conference over there, telling my speech about, well, GHG emissions are rising in X gigaton of CO2 per year. Climate change is ongoing with global warming, 2 degrees Celsius, but we should stay below 1.5 degrees Celsius and so on. And at the end of the presentation, there is one guy in the audience that just interrupted me and said, well, look, Fred, you seem to be a very kind person. You are a bit inspirational and so on. But to be honest with you, I have no idea what plus 2 degrees Celsius means. I don't know. I count in Fahrenheit. And you are telling me a lot of things about gigatons of CO2 emitted and so on. I don't know. That's not my metric. And when he said that, I was like, oh my God, he's so right. And I was very embarrassed because I could not translate for him what 2 degrees Celsius would mean in Fahrenheit. Now I know it's 35 Fahrenheit. You can check on Google. But at that point, I was very embarrassed. The point is, he said, all this discussion around climate change, global warming, and so on seems to be very much European-centric. And I, as an American, I don't feel like you are talking to me. I don't feel like you are speaking the same language. I don't feel like you are taking care of my own preoccupations. So this conclusion was really striking for me. And now we pay very much attention when we talk about this with our American partners. In Europe, well, I'll tell you another story. When I was at the COP28, I discussed with a lot of Europeans living there and working there. And they told me, look, Fred, in Europe, people are just tired about the environment. It's been 30 years that we ask people, switch off the light, sort off your trashes, use a bike instead of a car. And every year, things are getting worse and worse and worse. Bad news, negative news. We try to blame on people. So they said, well, look, people are just tired about it because things are not getting better. However, they told me here in UAE, because they were living there for 5-10 years, they said people are getting excited. People have never been told before to just save energy because energy was available as much as water is. It was very easy for them to access energy. But now we ask them to be careful with this. So they are very excited because it's new. They have this excitement related to novelty. And that's a very important factor to consider. The other element that I wanted to take into account was about companies. What about the carbon neutrality engagement? A very interesting fact from American companies is lots of them told me, I will not invest in anything that will reduce my carbon footprint if it doesn't bring a positive impact for my business. New revenues, less costs, more profitability, whatever. But over there, if the language of sustainability is not directly linked to business and social language, it may be difficult to move on. In Europe, well, there's obviously a lot of motivation, but usually what I can feel with companies is that it's a necessary burden to integrate in the strategy of the company. We need to comply to regulations. We need to respond to customers' requests and so on. It's not an opportunity, it's just a burden. In UAE, it's completely different. As I told you already, they see in the decarbonization market a new market to develop, and they want to be in the driving seat. They want to be the suppliers of the decarbonization market, supplier of finance, supplier of technology, of people, and of expertise. And that really impressed me how enthusiastic they are about it. Last, it's about political engagement and regulation. So what about the regulation? In the US, it's quite light. SEC released a climate law that is below expectations, let's say. In Europe, you know them very well, I'm sure. I will not get into details, but we can talk about it a bit later. And in UAE, it's a bit different. The authorities over there, they just said, we are going to be carbon neutral by 2050, and no one will question it. I mean, everybody will gather behind this direction, and everybody will do whatever they can to get to the result. It's a matter of pride. It's a matter of honor. If they publicly said, we will do this, they will want to do this, and they will do whatever it takes to do it. So that's for today in terms of regulation. What about the future and the commitment? You all know that in the US, there are elections. Not sure if Biden and Trump are the best advocates for climate actions. So that's a bit worrying. In Europe, I put it here in green and orange. Green because we have a clear political commitment, but orange because it's been a bit questioned lately. If you look at what the French government, the UK government, the German government mentioned quite recently in the news, it's a bit like, okay, maybe we should slow down about the environmental effort because it's difficult to keep up with the economy and the social impact and so on. So things are a bit stalling. And in UAE, well, the political commitment is, as far as I know, and for the foreseeable future, quite high. So we talked about the US, Europe, Middle East. Aren't we missing the elephant in the room here? Can you think about maybe a region or a country I have not mentioned yet? Who could that be? Obviously, it's China or more largely Asia. And at D-Carbonize, we're very lucky that we also have a bit of experience over there. D-Carbonize has some partners in Taiwan and China. We are connected with customers over there. We discuss a lot with people, experts over there. And what I can tell you is they literally broke some of the, I should say now, misconceptions I had about Asia. Well, if I want to be honest, a few years ago, if I had to picture the industrial situation in China, I would have drawn most likely something like this, like the picture you're seeing. Today, these conceptions are completely broken. I would like to share with you two of them that I had. The first one is Asia or China pollute a lot, and we in Europe, we are the only one to tackle climate change. Yes, it's true in absolute value, but no, not at all in relative value. Let me explain with one example. Everybody is familiar with GDP, right? It's a measurement of the wealth of a country. Sometimes it's also associated with welfare, well-being of a country. If you look at Luxembourg, they rank 70th in the world. If you look at Nigeria, they rank 32nd position. Would you say that Nigeria is wealthier, that people in Nigeria would live better than in Luxembourg? You need to use a relative value. You need to use a ratio. And that's why it exists, the GDP per capita. And with this ratio, Luxembourg ranks 3rd and Nigeria 145th. So with this, you will understand immediately that people in Luxembourg may have a better welfare than people in Nigeria, for example. All right? So for GHG emissions, it's exactly the same. If you look at absolute values, yes, it means not a lot. For example, China and India together, they account for 38% of the global GHG emissions, while in Europe, we account for 7.5. If you look at the GHG emissions per capita, the ratio, then it's completely different. Sorry for this graph. This graph is a bit old. It's from 2018, but the point remains the same. In China, on average, people would emit roughly 7 tons of CO2 per person, whereas in Europe, it's roughly 10 tons of CO2 per person, and in the US, it's 15. So when you know that, you're a bit challenged, right? And the people I met in China, I discussed with, they asked me if myself or we as European more generally, are we in the best position to judge? They usually say, well, look, clean up your mess first, clean up your own front door, and then let's talk about it a bit later, right? Because you're still above us. And another argument that they have, look at the trade balance and look at the deficit. We need to remember that in Asia, and more specifically in China, they produce a lot for us. They produce a lot of goods. I put it here, the trade balance for 2023, it's roughly 3 billion euros. Now, think about what would be our emissions if we had to produce everything that Asia is producing for us. How much additional energy would we need? And most likely this energy would be fossil energy. Speaking of energy, it's the key to fight climate change because 75% of GHG emissions are coming from the energy sources that we are using, and because those energy sources are carbonated. If we want to decarbonize the energy sector, it's very simple. Studies have shown how much we need to invest. It's roughly between $1,500 and $3,500 billions per year. It's a lot of money, and this money, 70% of those investments should go where? To the power sector, to building power plants that would use decarbonated energy. This principle has been very well understood by Asian governments, which leads to my next misconception. We in Europe, we are the only one to invest in renewable or green energy. That's completely wrong. I was completely wrong, and let me show you why. If you think about green energy or renewable energy, I'm sure that you will think about some sources like solar panels, wind turbines, nuclear energy. So let's have a look at nuclear energy. These are the quantity of electricity in megawatt hour produced by nuclear capacity for the top countries, right? And here you will find a number of nuclear reactors under construction right now with their associated electricity capacity. What's really impressive is China, Korea, and India, they rank among the countries that are investing the most in new nuclear capacity. So I'm not debating here whether or not nuclear energy is good or bad, good for the environment. The only thing I know is it doesn't emit a lot of GHG emissions when it produces electricity. So that's my point today. Now, let's go back. If we are looking at the graph here, the capacity of the current capacity of nuclear energy, the market share of this capacity is right now dominated by North America, so US, Canada, and European countries. And Asian countries, represented mostly by China and India, would be third. If we add the new capacity with the reactors that are under construction, and I did the math for you, the equilibrium is completely changing. They take the leadership position, and if this gap keeps increasing, then we will be completely lagging behind. So that's for nuclear energy. Now, let's have a look at other green energy or renewable energy, windmills and solar panels. The bars here represent for different countries or regions what should be the new installation of electric production from solar panels or wind turbines every year until 2030 in order to meet the targets that countries have set for the energy transition. All right, so that's the target. Now, that's the capacity, the electric capacity installed by each of these countries in 2022. So that's installed. China is the only country that not only met its targets, but exceeded them. And that's another sign that they are moving full speed forwards to decarbonize their energy sector. And obviously, I haven't talked about the mines and the technology that they have. If you want some examples in the battery sector, you know, the negative side of a battery is called the anode. 100% of the anodes used in batteries today are coming from China or Chinese companies. They control the full value chain. If they stop the supply of these anodes, there's no battery anymore in the world. Same for technology. I'll give you two examples related to technology that really impressed me. The first one is related to mobility in cities. You know, if you want to decarbonize cities, you really need to tackle mobility, and within mobility, you have public buses. And one of my friends told me, "Well, look, when I was in Beijing, most of the buses were electric." I didn't believe that, so I did some research, and in the end, 75% of the public buses in Beijing are fully electric. So I had a look at what's happening in Brussels. You know, the STIB, the operator, it's only 6%. Think about the number of years it will take for the Brussels city to catch up with Beijing to get to 75%. Maybe they will never get there. Another example is related to the electric vehicle industry. Again, I'm not here to discuss whether electric vehicles are good or bad. That's not the point of today. But we would all agree that storing energy with batteries is key to the energy transition, and the electric vehicle industry is accelerating the developments of the storage capacity of electricity. Do you know this car? It's the IML6 from SAIC. SAIC is one of the largest, if not the largest, car manufacturer in China. They will be the first one in the world to produce a car with a solid state battery, as opposed to current batteries that are liquid. We all know that something solid takes less space than something liquid. So for same battery, you can have a battery that is much smaller. So for same size, you can have much more capacity. That's for next year. In Europe, the first car manufacturer able to produce a car with this technology is not expected to be before 2030. They are 5 years ahead of us. So my conclusion are that I feel very confident about and feel very confident and positive about our chances to fight climate change. You know, at COP28 and with all the people I discussed with all around the world, I heard stories, I saw projects that make the energy transition possible, allowing us to move, well, from this scenario that is not very positive to a more positive scenario that is much more greener and much more positive. And this is on this positive note that I would like to highlight someone, quote someone that I really admire. It's Bertrand Piccard. So I had a chance to meet Bertrand Piccard at COP28. And when we were chatting, he said, well, the more you advocate sacrifices, the more resistance you create. I want to stop with this eco-pessimism, this eco-anxiety that leads to nothing at all. And I do agree with that. We really need to see in climate change, like in any challenges, a source of opportunities, and we need to leverage them. We need to leverage them by getting the best out of each one of us and combine it for the fight against climate change. So let me tell you what is, in my opinion, the positiveness recipe to fight climate change. We need to be pragmatic like Americans. There is no way that we will succeed if we disconnect decarbonization, business, and social impact. We need to be disciplined like Europeans, meaning that we need regulations, we need laws to accelerate the transition. But we also need to be enthusiastic like Emiratis, to be positive, to embrace this change. And we need to be ambitious like Chinese, to invest in our equipment and to perform R&D researches. That's all for me for today. Thank you very much for your time.